Terrillian Podcast, number 7, Seed of Demaes. Terrillian, planning her revenge, steeled her heart and tried something utterly new to her. Because she could not set foot upon the planet Terrillian, for the blood of Kraith defended it, she created a physical manifestation of her hunger, a creature that could reach out into the planet and seek out and drain the last of Kraith's power. She called this creature Demaes, her child. She then sent him with the seed of Demaes that would act as the siphon to drain Terrillian and help him conquer it. The duo would arrive to the world and with ease erase a city from the surface of the world. He then planted the consuming seed, and its tendrils reached out into the world and began to choke the life from it. Avenging armies arrived to kill Demaes, but him, using the power and the strands of the seed, impaled them all, lifting them high into the air, causing their blood to drop like rain. Kath, hearing of Demaes and feeling the wrong being done to this beloved world, went forth to confront Demaes. He arrived to the now decimated ruins of a great city, and there found Demaes reveling in the massacre. However, his victory was short-lived. Demaes met with the grisly wrath and the unveiled rage of Kath, and with one hand Kath destroyed Demaes, ripping him apart. Kath then gripped the seed of Demaes and ripped it from the world, and took it and Demaes' head as trophies. Welcome to the Terrillian Podcast, where we talk about the magnificent world of Terrillian created by Ian, who joins us today as a co-host to talk about Chapter 7, The Seed of Demaes.
Dude.
Our other co-host is Chris, our media manager and music producer, whose music you can hear playing in the background.
No, because of the chips.
Why are you eating Pringles?
We also have Marina, the one laughing maniacally in the background right now, who keeps us all on track and is the other half to all of our brains. And then finally, you have myself, Beard, who is the resident book nerd and all around just loving fantasy and sci-fi.
So I would ask more questions about this, but now I kind of want some chips. Anyway, so to get things started, tell me about the seed. We read a little bit, right, about it, but can you give like some more detail to it? I guess I'm more curious on, I thought Terrillian was drained of power, right? She had gone to all the worlds, consuming all those other worlds. Now she cannot consume Terrillian because the Darthmor fight her off, right, in the previous episodes that we've talked about. So can you kind of talk to me about how was this seed created? What does it look like? Just some more details about it.
So I always kind of, for what it looks like, to be honest with you, it looks kind of like a peach pit. Have you ever seen one of those? How it's like very porous and holy in the way it looks. Mm-hmm. But imagine that the size of like bigger than a basketball, maybe like a smaller beach ball size. So it's huge. It's a very large seed. So the idea that I had was Demaes being the one who would protect the seed would search out the Dawasil and basically start killing everything in its path. And instead of people dying and returning back to the Dawasil, as far as that energy that we talked about in the last episode, instead of that going back to the Dawasil, it would go to her. So what happens is when she makes a seed and they enter that city, they completely decimate the city, and all the death that happens there, instead of going back to Kraith, it goes to her. So she starts essentially already feeding on the planet immediately. It's kind of like a straw.
Okay, so I was thinking like it was being stored within the seed and then they would return it to Terrillian. But no, it's going directly to her.
It's a direct siphon.
So when Kath rips it from the world, she's like, oh, Demaes failed.
Yeah, that's how she gets her clue in that Demaes is a failure. So for her, Demaes is part of her. There's a scene in, Clash of the Titans, where they talk about Hades producing the Leviathan or whatever, and he said he took from himself and now he's kind of weak and decrepit, and that's why he talks in a dusty voice and whatnot.
That was really good.
Right? Thank you. Yeah, that's why he talks like that. Same kind of concept applies for her. She did the exact same thing. However, she's already just consumed a city of life. So she just got herself a massive power kick.
But
from that one
creating the seed took power from her to do that?
It did. So she basically weakened herself and got all that power back after they wiped out a full city. That's why it's kind of important to have her.
So she was losing power, but had enough power to create something, but not necessarily. It's like she could feel herself fading, and she's like, "Oh, I need to replenish myself. That's how I need to do it." But I can't get there, so let me create with what power I have to this thing that can get me more.
Yes,
and then they do destroy the city with the seed. Like you said, she gets that kick. She's like, "Oh, this is working out. I've already got a return on my investment here."
Yeah.
It's funny to compare her to Kraith, though. He was able to create this awesome planet. She can create a seed.
Yeah. So she has the ability to create, I would say, but it's much more weaker than Kraith's ability was.
And that's not even necessarily like her nature. From what I remember reading so far, her nature is not so much to create, it's to consume.
And she only created something to help her consume more efficiently.
I like that spin on it. But if she's consuming all this stuff, or even if she were to consume Terrillian, what could she create?
If she would consume the very essence of Kraith itself, then she would be self-sufficient at that point.
Okay.
Because she's basically consumed energy. She's consumed the source. Everything returns back to Kraith. Her consuming Kraith would be the end. She wouldn't have to rely on anything else. She would be able to start pushing out design.
Okay.
But yeah, that ain't happening for her so far.
I guess not.
Do you have any drawings of Demaes at all?
Yeah. Actually, I'm working on one right now. Just because
Can you describe what he looks like? Because I'm picturing like a guy in dark glasses, Men in Black-esque. He walks in with like a seed suitcase. Like what? Can you describe this?
So you guys all have watched Star Wars. You remember what the Twi'leks look like?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you remember they had those huge tentacles that come down the back of their head?
Oh, okay.
So imagine that same thing, only 10 times more. So these things are huge, and they actually drape behind them almost like a coat.
Okay.
Like a blanket. And then you have several little tentacles coming off, really leaning into the whole seed rooting aspect. And then you have him, Demaes himself, and he has a very, he's a big guy. He's muscular, he's toned, he's huge. He's about roughly the size of Calf. So he's roughly equal in size.
Human or something else?
So Darth Mars their skin tone is like a dark gray, shadowy gray. His is more like this kind of this fleshy mass. So it has porousness to it. It's not as well designed as the way Kraith's or Calf's body looks in comparison. It's more of like this fleshy, human form taking design.
I instantly had this mental picture of a burn victim. How their flesh looks almost melted.
Yeah, a lot like that. To where it's put together, but not put together well. Okay. Kind of like a
because it's her first attempt.
It's her first attempt. Yeah. It's kind of like a kid trying to put something together with Legos. It's not going to look as good as somebody who knows what they're doing, but it's going to work. That's why, he's able to decimate a city of lower beings, which would be the regular inhabitants. However, when you have somebody like Calf show up, he doesn't really stand a chance.
Is there any significance to this city, this location where this happened? We're talking about the city and it gets decimated and becomes ruins, right? Is there any reason why it's this place versus any other place, or just it just
I didn't
happened?
give that much thought, honestly. I wanted him to land on a place that wasn't going to have too much value to the storyboard of the game, because obviously if you decimate a city, you got to build it back up.
And we've talked in the past where you could have quests or places where you would learn information, not necessarily power up or get items or something. Would there be any significance in this place to learn something? Or it just seems like Terrillian's attempt to gain power done by Calf. He stopped it, right?
Yeah.
So that's it.
He shut that down. So when Demaes shows up, wipes out the city, the only remnants of him left when your character comes into play is the seed of Demaes itself is still in circulation, and then his head as a trophy. That's about it. But by that time, it's fully, decomposed, and it's really just the bones, these not very well formed bones that are left behind.
Does the place stay a ruin since the seed did take?
It did, yeah. So that place.
So does it never end up? It's like a burn.
Yeah, it's like a scar on that area from where the seed did root down.
Okay. And I'm assuming eventually, all the skeletons end up falling off the tendrils. Wait. No, are the tendrils permanent, or when
they came up? when Calf ripped it out, the tendrils are still left behind like dead branches. but
Okay,
they
so
have
like to
life
this
them.
point, there's just these spikes sticking up in the air, and there's ruins everywhere. Ooh.
Yeah.
I
Plus
honestly
you have the
like.
impact of that.
I know it's like might be kind of grotesque, but I actually love that mental picture of like everybody being spiked up and then their blood just pouring out like rain in this decimator. It's like horrific, and I love it.
And it's supposed to really draw
Poetically
you that
horrific.
context where it's like this is not just like some regular guy who's going in there and his goal is just to wipe out the planet and move on with his day. He's literally there for mass carnage. Like his goal is to wipe everything out, and he doesn't care how he goes about doing it.
Did he have any plans or foresight or anything into Calf? Right, like we with our reading, it was mainly 1-2 sentences. Calf comes in, destroys it, stops it all immediately. Right,
Shuts it
which
down.
is epic strength on Calf's part, and we get it. Right, Terrillian's just creating Demaes, and she obviously doesn't have any power, hardly any power. Right, but like, was there any thought or any plan to Demaes trying to go in, get this power for Terrillian? Did they not think Calf would be able to stop it?
So she's still weeding out, kind of like pressure testing Calf's ability, because he withstood some of her initial assault, which we left that kind of as a blank area of how she interacted with him. I say like an asteroid kind of thing, where they just kind of teamed up and repelled her. But now she's trying different methods to where she doesn't have to personally go down there and risk herself, because at the end of the game, she's cowardly. Think about how she took out Kraith. She didn't do it directly. It wasn't a fair fight.
Did she
waited
not
till he was
think
weak.
Calf would respond then? Like, it sounds like Calf had that instinct, this is happening, I gotta
So
go stop it.
Demaes' job, if you will, he had 2 different prerogatives. One, get the seed, plant it down, get that going. Second job is to protect the seed, but also kind of act as a shield for it in a way. Like his job was to keep all the heat on him while the seed does its job and starts rooting in. Honestly, the way I kind of saw it, if Calf hadn't shown up when he did, the seed would have rooted so far down into the ground that even Calf couldn't get it out. Kind of like a thorn festering on the skin. If it gets left there too long unchecked, eventually it would have taken the entire planet.
So it seems like it had the potential to do like some pretty heavy damage, but she just didn't realize how in tune with the planet
Calf is.
Calf really is.
And underestimated
kinda-
just how powerful
Yeah,
Calf
or was
would
just
be
like
compared to her creation.
hoping like, maybe he won't notice.
Well, he definitely would have noticed, and she knew that he would have noticed. She just has a level of arrogance that is godlike, hence her new status, where she thinks that, oh no, we'll be fine.
So kind of like no one's gonna stop me.
Yeah, no one can
vibe.
stop me, kind of thing. She's like, this is foolproof. It's gonna work, and then she's
I'm
also
being
kind of
crafty. They're not going to
Yeah.
see this coming, and
it's gonna be fine. It's gonna work out. And she did get a decent amount off of that initial attack. She did basically get what she invested tenfold over, which is kind of what helps her take the next steps into this planet as far as trying to take it.
What is the size comparison of Terrillian compared to some of these other planets within like the universe that she has previously consumed? Because she was consuming like planet after planet. Granted, that was like over a course of time, but in this, like on the planet of Terrillian, she consumes one city, and that's enough. to
That's
make
how
her
big this
feel
planet
somewhat
is.
okay.
Think of it like this. You have regular planets that are roughly the size of Earth, right? Then you have the sun. And you have much, much larger things. That's how I've always envisioned it.
Okay.
Because the Earth is quite small in comparison to the sun.
Yeah.
And so that's what I've always wanted. Because I wanted it to be the biggest canvas I could make. Because I wanted to be able to paint a whole bunch of different stories, a whole bunch of different worlds within this world and make it just massive.
Mm-hmm.
So giving it just a massive amount of size, one, adds to the kind of the majesticness of it all, but it also allows me to really have freedom to create where I want to without having to make a whole different system or a different galaxy to play in.
I also like the mental picture of just like technically Demaes and the Seat did not really kill that many individuals on a grand scale, but it shows just how potent the power of the Dawasil, Kraith's power, is compared to Terrillian. That she was able to recoup her energy from this tiny amount of damage that she did.
You got any thoughts there, Chris?
I got my chip.
You got your chip? You
I
happy
know.
there, buddy?
Full circle, just like Terrillian.
Is that would you say that's an accurate like
Yes,
depiction of it, though?
100%. Like, to run back on that, yeah. No, I would say that the fact that they are there and they're basically steeped in Kraith's essence all the time, not as much as being directly in the Dawasil, but being on that planet. And that was the last thing he ever created, which he poured all that he could into it. So that being the last place, those people are kind of like super packs. You know, she drains a city of them. She's really feeling good. So she still wants to take more. She doesn't have the idea of like, maybe I should save some of these people and have them live there and just drain off of it gradually. She doesn't think that way. She's just like, I want it all. So she keeps coming back for it.
I got a question. What happened to Demaes' head?
He kept it.
He just kept. So what do they do? They put it in a chest or something, or do they
So,
display it somewhere?
Do we find it in the game?
Yeah.
100%. Yep. I wanted to have it so when your character comes in, a lot of the Darth Merrick race has been pretty much wiped off the map. A lot of their cities have been overbuilt. You know, people have built over them. New cities have emerged, small kingdoms, all this stuff. It's not too far off from our world, the way it looks as far as like the medieval era. But I wanted there to be like catacombs deep within vaults, all these things. And at one point, and it will be more of like an Easter egg for them. Like the person finding this won't know what they're finding. But for me as the...
There's no treasure map?
No, because why would they make a treasure map? They don't. There's no value to that skull other than its historical significance. The real value is the seed of Demaes, which actually does get found, and there's a huge storyboard that comes off that seed. But as far as like the head itself, it's more of kind of like a historical part where you're just like, oh, that's what that is.
So do you get to keep it as a character then?
I've always considered whether or not your character could walk up and just grab this head, like in like a more.
Put it
there
in
was
their
all
house.
sorts of items, like you get what was it, the bone of that priest? It was like the bone of Job or something like that. It's something like that. Some character you can get his bone. I remember in Morrowind, I would like again. I reference Morrowind a lot, all-time favorite game. But I remember one of my favorite things to do was just collect random things because there was all these different character bones and quests that you could have. So I had like the head of this guy and the bone of that guy and whatever, and I just thought it was hilarious and fun. The cool part about the Demaes' head is it's like 2, maybe 3 times bigger than the average human skull. So you have this thing and it's just massive. It's like just a huge freaking head that you just get to put in your house. And you don't even know the story behind it. You just have this massive thing there. You're just like, that's interesting. And then finally, if you do enough digging, you'll eventually find out what it is.
Just picture a character walking out of a cave like, look what I found.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like a bull skull for some people, but I always thought like the historical significance of what it is just awesome.
The bone of Pope J.
Yeah, that's it.
Pope J. That's amazing. No, that's funny. I was trying to think, like, where would Calf put the seed of Demaes? I'm like, well, what's the most secure place on Terrillian? I'm like, oh, where the Dao cells. I'm like, that's the one place you don't want to put
Yeah, he doesn't have it over there. That's the place. That's the farthest place he's going to keep that seed. But it gets found. Bottom line, it gets found and it gets utilized in a whole new
Why not
way.
just destroy it?
He can't.
Okay.
So he tries to destroy it, but the relationship with him and that seed is basically inseparable. So it's kind of like you saying, why can't you just destroy the Dao? So you can't.
Right.
And once that seed became related to the planet in the way that it did, it's part of it now. It has a direct siphon to Terrillian herself, but it's also just as related to Kraith's planet. So at that point, he had no ability to kill it.
What does he do with it?
He separates it, basically puts it from the farthest point from the Dao cell as he can, because that's what the seed wants, is the Dao cell. So it's like, this thorn still exists, but it's now in a place where it can't get anywhere. It can't kill anybody, so it can't grow.
So it's hidden in a very isolated, desolate place.
Yeah.
But it's not too far from the Dao cell? Because he can't leave that area, right? Isn't that the
Well,
whole
luckily
Darth Maul
for
concept?
him and his relationship, he can leave the Dao cell and move around where he chooses.
It was their
but
creatures that they made to defend the Dao, so
Okay.
they
The
can't.
Dagroth can't leave it. But the seed itself has now been basically entrusted in the care of other Darthmas and Darth Mars that live on the planet, not necessarily Cap. Cap, his one responsibility is the Daosil. So he basically was able to put it as far away from them as possible, but not allowing it to get the one thing it needs, which is life, to grow more.
Now, you just brought up Darth Mar and Darth Ma.
Yeah, I did.
What is the difference there?
So you have Darth Mars, which is the original 13, and then you have, Calf as well. Darth Maz were... It's a very, very long story, but to kind of break it down as much as I can, you have the race of humans that live on the planet. You have the Darth Mar interacting with them, and they would essentially anoint or bless certain people of there to become Darth Maz. And these Darth Maz would form. I've always kind of gone back and forth how the Darth Ma would form, but they were kind of like these enhanced characters that would basically rule over nations or govern. Not rule, because you had the Darth Mars that would do that. But like I said before, the planet is just so massive.
You need your governors.
You need governors. You need like people that would run certain sections of the planet. So basically electing these Darthmas to start doing that for them, they're able to kind of secure the planet a little more efficiently. And the way that Darthmars work is if a Darthmar passes, kind of like the Seed of Demaes, how it's a siphon and it goes straight to Terrillian. If a Darthmar patron passes, its Darthmas will pass. They will all go because they are siphoned off him. So if a patron goes, the Darthmas go. So the patron would set up all these Darthmas to rule over a city and protect him, and then they would be the most loyal to him because they know without him they're gone. So they would always kind of be like the structure of the planet as far as keeping law and order.
Well, actually, I've had this thought before, but now that we're talking about Demaes and Calf and then creation and whatnot, and how the seed was going to sap the Dawasil away and feed it to Terrillian, but then you have the Darthmar, which are utilizing the Dawasil. Why don't the Darthmar do the same thing that Demaes was trying to do? Why don't they just wipe out everybody and then have all that power just in the Dawasil for them to use?
Because once they did that, power would end there. This power would stop at the Dawasil. They wouldn't have that circulation. If it was something that was coming from Terrillian herself, where she consumed it and then she had the ability to create more, she can feed off creation. So she can make more to feed off of. It's a circular pattern. But if you're just burning it and you don't have something replenishing it, like we talked about before with the idea of, if you have somebody who has a kid, that's basically new life that's been formed, and thus it continues the whole Dawasil structure and form. So they are wise in the sense that they're not wiping out the human race. They have no goals to wipe out the human race. They need that constant circle of life routine to keep the Dawasil working.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about that seed. Can you tell me what, maybe kind of describe it or give me a visual when it's draining the life? What does that actually look like?
So when the seed's active and it's actually being utilized in its initial form, the seed starts to go in, and first it will kill everybody that it's near, which is what it did with that first bout where it basically piked everybody up, and it drains that essence of creation from them.
Like we use the words choke the life, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that, are we seeing trees and plants and stuff just kind of wither and die?
So it basically starts taking everything from Kraith's creation and leaving just the husk, and it's immediately feeding that right back to Terrillian. So she essentially starts growing and basically immediately getting a return on the investment that we talked about earlier. So at that point, when it starts doing that, it's not necessarily tapping into the Dawasil, which is like the purest form of creation there is. It's tapping into what's around it. So it starts feeding off the people, it starts feeding off the ground, the land, the animals. And that's why when, Calf finally does show up, he's just horrified at what he sees, because all these people are just dead, piked up on these spikes from when Demaes came down. Because the way the seed and Demaes work is, I describe them as a duo. I don't describe one without the other because they work together. And it's kind of like having someone driving it. So Demaes kind of has this influence over the seed where he's able to utilize it to attack other people, but he's driving that seed forward. The seed has one function, it's a straw, but the straw isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's just, it has a function. It knows what it needs to do. It's doing its job. And Demaes is making sure that it takes all that return and putting it back towards Terrillian herself.
How... Can you give me more a visual of how it's returning that power to Terrillian? How is she able to acquire this power from the seed in such a long distance?
So the magic idea of the game, when we talked about their physical manifestation, where you can touch it, interact with it, and you get that pure form, or you can use the magic system of the game, it's the same kind of concept. It's not bound necessarily by distance, because you kind of have how do I describe it? Kind of like radio waves. You have a hard cable where you can get a connection immediately through a hard cable. You have radio waves where you can connect it in that way. Think of it like that. So she's getting this kind of almost like this pure scent that's just going back to her, where it's just all this power is just being funneled through her through the magic system back. And the seed acts kind of like a
Wi-Fi router.
Yeah, kind of like a Wi-Fi router. That would be a good way to put it. So it's just pumping all that back up to her.
When I'm thinking about this too, can you tell me a little bit more about Demaes arriving on the city? How is he able to do it with ease? And does Calf know then where Terrillian is resting right? Like if he's able to get there so quickly or with ease, he's sensing the planet being drained, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there any insights you can give us into, like, he knows now where they come from or where Terrillian's resting, or how are they able to get here so easily, right?
So you remember the show Avatar, like not the Blue People show, but Avatar: The Last Airbender.
Yes.
Okay, so you know that scene where the guy Toph is fighting someone and they're trying to figure out how she fights when she's blind, and like as soon as somebody hits the ground, she's able to pick that up.
Yes.
That's how Calf works. So if somebody starts tapping into the Taoiseal, as soon as the Taoiseal either starts feeding or growing or moving in any capacity, he's aware of it. He has that immediate connection to that. So when you have Demaes land on the planet, he knows that there's nothing there, and then Demaes hits, there's something there. There's something that just hit.
He feels it, he sees it, but it's more than just seeing, right? He actually, he's
and then you have that whole
it.
idea of like, the one punch thing where he just like zaps across the planet very quickly or something cool like that.
It didn't sound like he immediately went. It's not until Demaes had planted the seed and decimated
started.
the army that Calf was like, oh, there's something more going on.
Because that's when he started interacting more or less with the Taoiseal's pickup.
Okay.
But
But
question. This may be a dumb question because you said like he got there in some sort of speed. How do they get places? I don't know how to ask that. Like, do they walk everywhere?
It's a pretty straightforward
Cars,
question. I
fly?
mean, I kind of always thought that they could ride on gigantic beasts in one way, or they could do another route where like it's very, very typical anime style where you have somebody who's like super godlike and they like basically move from one area to another and it's like super fast. It's just like you have this like blip and there's just clouds and that's it, and you see them show up.
So is that how they move?
is it not
How do you
warping?
picture it?
What
I always
about
kind of picture
warping
Calf
with
as kind of like the OP of everybody. Like the rest of them are bound by certain kind of
like a Superman type character.
Superman kind of character.
Okay.
Just kind of this really super fast, just he's there. And that's kind of why he's the leader of everybody, because, well, you can't really fight the guy. He's everywhere.
He doesn't use that warp concept, though, with the Taoiseal?
He doesn't need to.
Okay.
So warping is a way to access the Taoiseal from a distance if you're not already in tune with it.
Okay.
So Darth Mars and, to an extension, Darth Muz, the lower breed, they already have that connection. So they don't have to necessarily, do that type of warping process in order to access it.
With that, we will draw to a close. We do appreciate all of you who have listened to our comprehensive discussion of the planet known as Terrillian. We entice you to listen and learn, following along with each podcast, so that you will visualize the vivid and vast world of Terrillian. A tragic tale set forth for the main protagonist, where you as the gamer would play to conquer lands and legends, thus creating a lore of your own. In doing so, we hope to gain your favor to turn these stories into a video game. If you want to see more content, check out our website at terrilliangaming.com. For more episodes, find us on Spotify and YouTube. Support our emergence.